I don't have really anything other than to say thank you for being here, Happy New Year, and I'm turning the floor over to our historian, Larry Fredrick.
Thanks. Thanks again for coming. I see some familiar faces. We should get a coffee klitsch together and just talk about history sometimes. We're not going to have time today to answer all your questions, probably. Today I've chosen the Silver Queen statue as a topic. Through the years, I've given many talks about myths, legends, and tall tales, and how a lot of history turns into a story, and how that story is told so well that it becomes acceptable. And it's a natural phenomenon. History around the world is that way. Probably the American West is one of the best examples of how we have the history of the West and we have the story of the West. And the mythology. And sometimes they all start with the same event or item, but they sort of cross paths occasionally, and sometimes the stories get to be a little more than the real events. So I thought today what I would do is take Aspen's Silver Queen statue, of which there are any number of fascinating stories, not any of them true. But if you'll allow me to go through here and tell you the real history, you'll begin to see where those stories begin to evolve and how we got to where we are today. So if you let me go through, I'll answer most of your questions, I think, as we go through. And then we'll have time to go through. Maybe you have some stories of the Silver Queen that I've yet to hear. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a good story. I like a good story too. But when we're talking about history, somebody said, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. And so historians have that conundrum. We're always faced with that conundrum. How do we deal with telling people that's not really what happened? So just to give you, just to start out, let me see if I remember how to push this. Is that the right button?
Yeah, just use one of the arrows.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
The idea of Silver Queen is not unique to Aspen. Aspen did not come up with the idea of Silver Queen. Okay, the term Silver Queen had been used in mining in the American West for decades. There are hundreds, probably thousands of mines that use the term Silver Queen. In Aspen, there were at least 4 mining enterprises that used the term Silver Queen. We had the Silver Queen Lode, we had the Silver Queen Mining Company, and 2 or 3 other Silver Queens. Even the term Silver Queen City, which Aspen didn't really adopt, people assigned that name to it, and Aspen wasn't too enthusiastic about that. Aspen used the term Crystal City of the Rockies, and they liked that term, but a lot of outsiders used the term Silver Queen City. But the first use of Silver Queen City in Colorado, and there were other Silver Queen cities. Montana's Granite City was the Silver Queen City of Montana. 1860. Georgetown, Colorado was the Silver Queen City of Colorado. Well, it wasn't Colorado, it wasn't even a state yet. In about the late 1870s, Georgetown's silver production had waned, and now Leadville was the new silver city. And it called itself the Carbonate City, but it also called itself the Silver Queen City. So the term Silver Queen's been used for a long, long time. Now Aspen did use the term Silver Queen in 2 more unique examples. And one of them is in a mountain. And this is Shadow Mountain right here. We're in the building that's right there. Well, right there today. And this is Shadow Mountain. And they, if you're on Smuggler Mountain and the sun is just right, you will see the profile of a silver queen. And that silver queen is lying on her back. This is her hair flowing down from her tiara. Here are her eyebrows. There's her nose and her chin. And if you have an imagination, you can see it. Okay? If you're in the 3rd grade and you have attended 3rd grade in the last 3.5 decades, then this is not the Silver Queen. This is the lying Ute Indian chieftain. And these are his feathers. And this is his eyebrows and his nose and his chin. And I will take full responsibility for that change. When we have 3rd graders at the Hole in Malone, we have this photo and we use it to remind them that before the prospectors were here, there were Native Americans. And it gives us a good example. And they can clearly see the Ute Indian chieftain. Although you will see, it says West Aspen Mountain, Silver Queen. So this was taken in about 1893, and I believe this is a Jackson photo.
Or Jackson,
yeah. So the other example that Aspen used to use the Silver Queen that was a little different than anybody else was they built a statue. And this is an impressive statue. This is the Silver Queen statue of Aspen. She is 18 feet high from the base to the top of the eagle. She was, well, let me tell you the story first, okay? The Silver Queen statue in 1893, it was obvious that Congress was going to repeal the Sherman-Silver Act. This would devastate not only Aspen and Colorado, but the major states in the West, 6 major mining states. So they were all extremely concerned. How do we promote silver? How do we convince people? And David Hyman went to Washington, D.C., spent 2 months there, talking with senators and representatives, and was getting nowhere. People in the East didn't have a sympathy for silver. And the president, Cleveland, was president, and he was flat against silver. Silver was being used, in a certain amount as the scapegoat for a lot of economic problems that were happening internationally and nationally. So the citizens of Aspen formed a committee and decided, instead of sending a mineral exhibit to the World Fair that was going to be held in Chicago in 1893, why not just over the top, let's build a statue. And it just so happens there's a mineral palace in Pueblo at that time, and they had a statue of King Cole of Trinidad. And he was quite impressive. He was 15 feet tall. And so the citizens of Aspen said, let's find the artist and let's have him build us a statue. We will send it to the World Fair, and millions of people will see the Queen. And then we'll actually solve 2 things. We'll have an exhibit to give to the Colorado Commission to take to the World Fair and represent Pitkin County. And then when the fair is over, we'll get the Mineral Palace off our back, because we'll give the statue to the Mineral Palace, because they've been on us to give them a display for their Mineral Palace. So we'll get rid of 2 things at once. So they hired Hiram Johnson to build the Silver Queen statue. Now he finished the statue a little bit early. So they decided for the grand unveiling, they would ship the statue to Aspen. She would be presented at the Armory Hall in Aspen, and you could go in. The first night it was $1 to go in, and there was live music, speeches, the governor wrote a letter, etc. And you could see the statue, and then the subsequent days and evenings it was 50 cents to get in. And then the statue was packed up, sent to Chicago, and displayed at the Chicago World's Fair. Millions of people went. We had 27 million people go through the gates between May 1st and October 30th. Many of those people went through 4 or 5 days. You couldn't see it in a week. It was an immense, massive World Fair. So the Queen, after the fair, was packed up and sent to the Mineral Palace, where she stayed. Now, the Mineral Palace was condemned and torn down. They started tearing down the Mineral Palace in 1941. So here we go. What happened to the Queen? Where is the Queen? Oh, and there are any number of stories. She was purchased by a collector in California. Some of them were so specific as to say Riverside, California. And it's in a private collection, and we'll never see it again. She was boxed up and sent to the State Museum, and they didn't have a place for her, so she's in a warehouse with all sorts of museum stuff. And maybe someday we'll dig her up and find her. Oh, the Great Conspiracy. She returned from Chicago behind King Cole. King Cole got back from Chicago before she did. Someone had made a fake Queen statue out of paper mache and switched, and the statue at the Pueblo Mineral Palace was a fake. And then, about 15 years ago, Country Day did a play on their history of Aspen, and they invented a story about her as well. She's buried at the bottom of Hallow Lake. And then a few years ago, when we had, somebody wrote a play, and it was, this symbolizes this, and this symbolizes that, and again, it was just all sorts of ideas. And maybe you've heard some other ideas as well. But let me read, I will read a description of what the statue really was. And this is a common press release that was used throughout the state. It appears to be a press release because other papers quote this almost verbatim. And it appears that this was presented by the Mineral Palace in Colorado Springs and the artist. So let's get a better picture of the Queen. There you go. Now you get a better photograph of how big she is. And I will read the description of her, and you can see the pieces and parts. This is from an Aspen Times reporter in March of 1893. The overall height from the floor to the Silver Eagle at the top is 18 feet. The base is 8 feet by 10 feet and covered in peacock iron. Along the base, on 3 sides, are glass display cases for specimens. There are 3 steps at the front of the base. Each tread is set with small tiles and silver dollars. The stair risers are of glass covered with the words Silver Queen of Aspen, Colorado, composed of heavy raised silver letters and electric lights, with a background of dark minerals trimmed with white crystals. The pillars supporting the statue are of burnished silver and crystals. From the side, located between the front and the rear pillars, are on one side the coat of arms of the Silver Queen. It is a silver dollar, a miner's pick, it's a pick and shovel on a silver dollar with the words Aspen, Colorado, Silver Queen of the World. On the other side is a relief of Aspen Mountain, and it's lit up in various colored electric lights. Each corner has a 6-foot chandelier or of tulip illumination. Rising to the throne level, one finds a canopy covered half chariot, half ship, more often described as an Egyptian barge in which the queen reclines. The terms Cleopatra and Roman goddess are used liberally in describing her highness. However, the intent of the artist was to represent a Pitkin County maiden 17 years of age, the same age as the state of Colorado. The front of the Egyptian barge transforms into a Roman chariot at the rear. One wheel represents the Silver Queen, goddess of fortune, and the other wheel represents fortune of industry. Logically, both fortune and industry must turn in unison to support the throne of silver. Quite poetic. Leading the entourage are two boys representing the mythical god of riches, one representing gold, one of silver. The coins flowing from their cornucopia are equal in number, thus demonstrating the parity of the two metals. The arms on the throne, you might not see them too well. There are two lions right here, and they have silver dollars in their mouths. The bow of the barge is a figurehead of a deer burnished in silver. The queen is standing on her own would be 10 feet tall. She is constructed entirely of sheet copper. The face, bust, and arms are plated silver, while her costume is covered with rough silver and brilliant minerals. Her hair is of white glass, and the jewelry is composed of silver dollars. Her right hand holds a huge illuminated silver dollar scepter, while her left hand rests in her lap, holding a scroll which says free coinage. Above the queen is an octagonal canopy of light metal ablaze with brilliant minerals and illuminated with a row of electric lights. Topping the canopy is perched a silver eagle. Such is the Silver Queen of Aspen. Already I heard some snickers. You already see where some stories are starting to come from. Here's the story of the Silver Queen of Aspen. And it has very little to do with the city of Aspen. And the Silver Queen of Aspen did not start in Aspen in 1893. The Silver Queen started in Pueblo, Colorado in 1889. Actually 1888. The Pueblo Chieftain newspaper, the editor had a great way to promote Pueblo and to suggest ideas. Instead of writing an editorial, he would have these interviews with unknown successful businessmen traveling through town. And they had a serendipitous meeting in a hotel lobby, and they asked him questions. And in 1888, they asked this unknown successful businessman, what would it take to make Pueblo a really cool place? And he said, oh, this is the most wonderful town, and you've got railroads, and you've got the iron, the steel mill, and you've got smelters, and you've got the coal mines coming in, and it's such a beautiful location. What you really need is a mining exchange. And a mining exchange is where we sell stocks, mining stocks. And you need one not just for Colorado mines, but for the whole West. And mining exchanges, everybody had them, they all failed. But this is what Pueblo needed. Well, that planted the seed. And it was a short time after that that it metamorphosed into what we need is a mineral palace. We need a huge, building palaces was a popular theme in those days. Some of you might be familiar with South Dakota, the Corn Palace. Same idea. It's a huge building and it's covered with corn husks. Every year they tear it down and rebuild. So what Colorado needs is a mineral palace, and it should be in Pueblo. And it will be huge. It's bigger than this city block. It's going to be 36 feet high inside. It is a monstrous building. And they have great ideas. All of the walls inside will have 10-foot high display cases. All of the counties of Colorado can bring displays and minerals and promote their counties and what they have. And by the way, we're going to build a stage, and we're going to have some statues. We're going to have a statue of King Coal. We're going to have a statue of King Gold. We're going to have a statue of King Copper. There was a brief mention of a statue of King Iron. And then for some unknown reason, they went feminine, and we need a Silver Queen statue. That's the first mention of a Silver Queen statue in Colorado. So the Mineral Palace does get built. It's quite controversial. It is not financed by the city. This is a private enterprise. This is the building. These are globes of the world holding up the corners, and it's immense. It's 560 feet long and it's 270 feet that way, and I think 500 that way. And this is the interior.
Wow.
And this is the stage right here. These are all the display cases all the way around, and you can see it is impressive. These domes, there are 32 domes in here, and they're incredibly detailed, wonderful detail. Notice that there is no statue. There is no King Coal, and there is no Queen of Silver. That's because the Mineral Palace was completed on July 4th, 1890, and the king had not been finished in time. They had convinced the city of Trinidad to sponsor Hiram Johnson to build a King Coal of Trinidad, the coal mining town of Trinidad. For $1,500, he would build a statue. When this is either the day before the grand opening or very shortly thereafter. This is sometime between July 4th, 1891, and September 9th, 1891, when the king arrived. It was 4th of July. They had 18 marching bands. They had 1,300 people stood at tables here for dinner. Logistically a little difficult. The building, as I said, was compromised somewhat. There were only 6 toilets in the entire building.
Jeez.
Not restrooms, toilets. It had no heat. So they had compromised a few things. But it was a grand celebration. Then in September, on September 9th, 1891, the king was presented. And it was said to have been as elaborate a celebration as the 4th of July. And the king arrived in September of 1891. And this is King Coal. And already, if you look at it carefully, you can see a lot of similarities. We've got a scepter. We've got the platform. We've got the display cases. We've got the silver burnished railing. We've got the silver burnished pillars. We've got the same type of lettering. This is Hiram Johnson's first statue. By the way, Hiram Johnson was declared a designer and artist. Hiram Johnson's real job was he operated a highly successful carriage restoration and rebuilding business in Puerto. And that was his real job. The king is not made of coal. This is coal. His face is pressed metal, presumably copper. That's the media that Hiram Johnson seemed to work in. If you've taken copper plate and you can press it and make a negative and then stick it up, and that's the positive. And that was coated. His hands are metal. This is canvas, which is covered with tar or something to make it look like coal. So that is King Coal. And he was there, but there is no queen. So, where is the Queen? The following day in the newspaper, in Pueblo, it says, the Queen is conspicuous by her absence. We don't have a Queen. Well, forget the King gold, copper, iron. They've disappeared from publicity. They're gone. But the Pueblo Mineral Hall officials and Hiram Johnson had a plan. They decided that if they approached the greatest silver city in the world, the carbonate city of Leadville, Colorado, that they could convince them to build a statue for $3,500. Surely with Horace Tabor and J.J. Brown and the rest of them, they would find someone to invest in this, and Lake County would want to do this, because this would put Lake County on the map, because people from around the world are going to come to our Pueblo Mineral Palace. Didn't happen. The letters in the editors in Leadville newspapers tried and tried. Everybody tried. Didn't happen. Mineral Palace officials, Plan B. And they add a new twist to it. It's now getting to be 1892. January 1892, no one is convinced that silver will not be demonetized. People are in a panic. Things are looking pretty grim. What do? They come to Aspen, Colorado, go to the Hotel Jerome, get a group of people together, rah, here you go, here's our Queen. And we'll send her to the World's Fair. So it solves two of Aspen's problems. What do we send to the fair? And why don't we put an exhibit in the Mineral Hall? For the simple price of $6,000. Things never change in Aspen. So from January until April of 1892, there's not a lot of interest. They want the city to give $500. The city won't give $500 unless the citizens start putting money forward. The citizens won't do it unless the city does. They kind of bounce it back and forth. Eventually, in April of 1892, they go ahead with it. And they raise $4,000, a little over $4,000, to get it started. But they understand we'll raise the money as you build the statue. So that's the last that's heard of the Silver Queen statue for several months. Nobody hears another word. We're going to build a statue. We went to the Colorado Commission for the World's Fair. They're good with this. We've got it all figured out. And nobody hears another word until September. And in September, the Aspen newspaper said, did we get scammed? Did the city get scammed again? So a reporter goes to Pueblo and he verifies that the statue is being made, and he gives a brief description very similar to this description. And then nothing is heard again until March of 1893. The statue is completed. We don't have to send the statue until sometime in April because the fair starts in May. So let's bring the statue to Aspen and have the grand unveiling there. There's a method to their madness. They're still owed about $2,000. So if we charge admission in Aspen, we'll make up the difference. And then we'll send her to Chicago. So they have a grand unveiling of the Silver Queen statue, March 21st, I believe it is, in the Armory Hall in Aspen. This is today's City Hall. This was the Armory Hall. And they had the Silver Queen presented here. It was a grand event. They had Mr. Ide's orchestra. They had the governor of Colorado, Davis H. Waite, from Aspen. could not attend, but he sent a letter. The railroad officials that brought the Queen up gave a speech. Hiram Johnson gave a speech. Mayor Rose gave a speech. And finally, they unveiled the Silver Queen statue to the public for the very first time. And she looks just like the other photos, just a different angle. But she was here. It was not enthusiastically received, as you may believe. The people were not interested in paying $1 to see the Queen. The Armory Hall was not jam-packed. The next day, the committee in charge of the Queen apologized and wanted to reiterate that this was not an admission charge, this was to help defray the cost of the Queen. She stayed here for a couple of weeks. People went for 50 cents. There was still live music every night. You could dance if you wanted to. But she was not enthusiastically received. And this description of the Queen, while extremely elaborate, there were also letters and editorials saying, what have we done? What is this supposed to represent? And are we really going to send this to Chicago? She's packed up, she's sent to Chicago. Problem. Colorado exhibit is in the Mining and Mineral Hall in Chicago. This is 5 acres, this building. 5 acres. This is the south entrance, and on the south entrance right here, right on this corner as you walk in, is the Colorado exhibit. Everybody in the world is going to see the Colorado exhibit. And the Silver Queen. No. She's too big for the Colorado exhibit. She is put in the northwest corner on the mezzanine in space 11M. She's by herself upstairs. This is 5 acres. By the time you've gone through that, are you going to go upstairs and see the Queen? Anyway, the Queen failed in her mission. The fair ended on October 30th, 1893, the same day that Congress repealed the Sherman Silver Act. November 1st, the President signed it. The Queen returns to Pueblo. Now, she was upstaged at the fair. And this may be where some confusion lies. Right behind Colorado was the Montana exhibit. And they have a 6-foot-tall Silver Queen of Montana. And she is solid silver. She was melted down from 60,000 silver coins. And I'll start getting stories eventually that the Silver Queen was made of solid silver. This may be where it was confused. I'll also point out, we'll get off guard. Montana's Silver Queen is not blindfolded either. Pitkin County's Queen is not blindfolded because justice is not blind, and this is an exception. No, it's not. That statue that's on the Pitkin County Courthouse was duplicated across the West, and this is not unusual. She is 6 feet tall. She is designed after a famous actress at the time who, according to the Montana commissioners, met 34 of the 36 perfect artistic dimensions of a woman. Needless to say, the Montana exhibit had 30 or 40 tons of ore, copper, silver, gold. Montana's exhibit upstaged Colorado's exhibit. So the Queen came back. Oh, this is just a ticket. That's what a ticket would look like. So the Queen came back, and she was displayed in the Mineral Hall. Now here's where some of the confusion is. Remember the photo I had of the Queen, or of the King by himself? A lot of the stories now say the Queen was late coming back from the fair, the King came back before she did. That's where the conspiracy was. She came back late because somebody was making a fake statue. And the King came back ahead. The King never went to the fair. So people have taken a photo from 1891 out of context and used it to explain their case. But the King never left. But the Queen was right here. This is elaborate. This is a waterfall. These are stalactites and stalagmites.
Wow.
There's actually water going through there. There's a mechanical wood fairy that comes out and plucks gold and silver nuggets out of the water.
Wow.
This was this is Victorian. This is the Mineral Palace.
Okay, thank you.
So here's just another photo. You can see the Queen a little bit. Oh, it didn't expand very well. So here is the Queen. Now here is the Queen in 1893. Here is the Queen in 1936. She looks very different. Okay, that's where the people say a papier-mâché queen was put in her place. No, this is the same queen. The Mineral Palace was incredibly unsuccessful. The Mineral Palace was bankrupt in 1892. Some anonymous group of people bought the Mineral Palace. It was assumed that it was the bankers in Pueblo to keep it there because they wanted to move everything from the palace to Denver and build a new palace. So it was a financial disaster. The roof leaked, there was damage to the floor. It never caught on. Obviously, because of the timing. 1893, nobody has any money. They decided to turn the palace into Saturday evening dances. And they had to drop the price on that one from $1 to 50 cents so that the people in town could afford to come to the dances. There were ads in the paper constantly, come see the palace, come see the palace. They did have a few conventions. They had to cancel a huge mining convention because a contractor had a $500 lien against the building. And they thought it was going to go bankrupt. So the palace was not successful. In World War II, or World War I, the city, prior to World War I, the city of Pueblo purchased the palace. And they turned it into the headquarters for the Parks Department and the Streets Department. And the caretaker tried to keep it open. And they actually had posted hours. I think it was 10 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, and then 7 in the evening until 10. But obviously that would not pay the light bills. The roof leaked. The floor was starting to peel. During World War I, it was used by the Red Cross. The Red Cross had moved in and used it. And then in 1921, the palace in Pueblo sits on the Arkansas River, and today Mineral Palace Park is off of I-25, just north of town, and it's up high. So in 1921, there was an incredibly disastrous flood, just totally destroyed Pueblo. And the Mineral Palace was used as the rescue area. So the palace tried to continue, but now it was closed more than it was open. And it was subject to vandalism. And that's when pieces started to disappear. And in 1927, they closed the palace. and it remained closed until 1936. During that time, pieces were vandalized. Maybe somebody decided they needed a stag. They came in. The coins eventually disappeared.
That's interesting.
The chains have disappeared. You can see a lot of pieces are disappearing. So that's what's happening to the Queen, and that's why she looks different, because she had been vandalized. Now in 1936, the WPA, Pueblo, worked out a deal with the WPA. They came in and they cleaned up the palace. They repaired as much of the floors as they could. Most of the displays that were privately owned were long gone. The owners took their displays and went back, took them back. So there was very little left. They tried to open the Mineral Hall again from 1936 until 1938. Still unsuccessful, just didn't catch on. In 1938, they closed it for the final time, and they owed money. They decided, let's see if we can't pay the light bills, the heating bills, and whatnot. So the person in charge of the Mineral Hall inventoried it and said, anything of any value, we're going to put it in a dump truck, and we're going to send it to Leadville. 35 tons of material is sent to Leadville. This is only one invoice of Mineral Palace ore samples. Anything that had any value at all went to Pueblo to be melted down. Is this the one? That's $85. Later they got a receipt that said, oh, we miscalculated, here's another $200. But 35 tons of material was taken. And then in 1941, the building was condemned. And they began taking the roof off. And this is the last known photo of the Silver Queen. If you look very carefully, way over here, there is Cleopatras Barge. There is her arm, and you can just barely make out her head. And that's the last known photo of the Silver Queen statue.
Where was this?
This is Pueblo. This is the Pueblo Hall. And that is the real story of the Silver Queen statue. Now, there are some other stories. She was named Molly Gibson. No, she wasn't. That came up in 1909. The very first Aspen High School yearbook was called The Silver Queen. And Evelyn Woon, a senior, wrote the history of the Silver Queen. She said that the Silver Queen wasn't a Colorado maiden, she was Molly Gibson. She is the one that started the rumor that she was made out of silver. She said that the Queen was made out of the silver from the famous Molly Gibson nugget, which weighed 1,800 pounds. But the only problem with that is that nugget was not pure silver. That nugget only had pure silver on two sides and extremely high-grade ore. And the problem with that theory is that in 1900, J.J. Hagerman, former owner of the Molly Gibson mine, still had the nugget in his possession because the New York newspapers reported him getting on a ship in 1900 to go to Paris to take his nugget to the World Fair in Paris. So that nugget was never used either. So through time, people made misrepresentations or assumptions. And so there's another couple of things. But the real story of the Silver Queen statue is, when she came back to Pueblo, there was no party. The Pueblo paper didn't even mention that she returned. The only thing the Pueblo paper mentioned about things being returned was there was a model of the Pueblo Mineral Hall, and the roof opened up and you could see the inside. That was sent to the World's Fair, and that was shipped to the Denver Museum. In about 1950s, a lady was, someone had asked her about what happened to the Silver Queen statue. She was a volunteer at the Pueblo Museum. And she clearly states, I just got to Pueblo 6 months ago. I don't know anything about this. I asked some old timers. And they said the Queen was sent to Denver. Later on in '73, I think it is, she actually wrote a very nice history of the Mineral Palace, and she admits that that's not what happened. But, you know, you have a volunteer that just hears a story and says, oh, well, the old timer told me that, that's what the history is. And that's not what the history was. So there's a lot of misrepresentation. Some people claim it was paper mache. A fellow in the 1960s said that he had remembered going to see the Queen in the 1930s. And he did not go up and touch her or feel her, but he said the thing that he remembered most about seeing the Silver Queen was around the floor there were green stains. Copper.
Yeah.
Copper. Now, the Queen was coated in silver because you could take copper and electroplate it. So her arms and the pressed tin looked like silver, but she was copper. And so that sort of gives away that she wasn't a... Also, the fact that the roof leaked, the paper mache would not have survived. So it's a great conspiracy. Besides that, if you have to make an 18-foot paper mache statue, how many people does it take to make that? It took 6 artists plus Hiram Johnson plus his partner, Mr. O'Neill. So that's 8 people right there. And then you have to hire somebody to switch it at the railroad station, and you've got to find a place to store it. And so, what have you got? 10, 20 people involved? The Queen herself was valued at actually cost $7,000. She was valued at 10, and well, the papers said she cost 10,000. It didn't. She cost 7, and she was valued at 20. But even if she were made out of silver and there was anything valuable on the statue, from May 1st at the World Fair to October, the price of silver had dropped by nearly half. So if you robbed it after the fair, you were getting pennies on the dollar. And you had to split it with 10 or 20 guys. You know, you might come up with $50 if she was valuable. And as you heard the description of her, there really wasn't anything of value. The letters on the Queen were said to have been pieces of silver bullion. Nope. About the only thing I found of value is that these are supposed to be little pieces of silver bullion. And that's about it. So she wasn't that valuable. In April, while she was being shipped to the fair, the Mineral Palace published a thing that said that the Queen, actual cost of the Queen was $7,000. When we brought her to Aspen to raise the balance, the $3,000 that we were short, we raised $200. It cost us $800 to send it to Aspen and Chicago. So they lost money. But we do not know, and what I haven't been able to research yet, is whether or not the Colorado Commission for the Colorado exhibit at the World Fair, whether they contributed. Because during the negotiations to build the Silver Queen, Hiram Johnson and the mineral officials went to Denver and discussed the Queen with that commission. So there may have been some money there. Before I leave, I did want to make one point, and that is, with many of these lectures that I do, I will write a research paper. And that research paper, this one, I need to revise a couple of things. But probably in the next few weeks, the museum will have it. So if anyone wants to do further research on the Silver Queen or question any of the research, it will be here at the museum. This is, right now it's 30 pages, it has 60 footnotes, and a full page bibliography. This 30 pages is derived, these are my notes, okay? These are my notes. And so I've condensed it to 30 pages. So the difference between history and a story is that at least with history, we can document. And that's the difference. So anyway, that is my story of the Queen. And if any of you have lots of questions, I'd love to answer questions. Oh, I'll be back next month. We're going to do early recreation in Aspen. Should be just fun. Yes, questions? Yeah.
I remember it being remarkable in the journals of Charlie Armstrong, no mention of the Silver Queen.
Charlie Armstrong?
Chicago.
Yeah, we were here last night with Tim Willoughby. Charlie Armstrong sold one of his mining claims to B. Clark Wheeler and the Little Annie Group, and he made $5,000, and he took a trip, and he went back east for 6 months. And he went to New York, and he went to Washington, and on his way back, he stopped in Chicago for a week.
Yeah.
And he describes everything he did at the World Fair.
He couldn't find it.
He never saw her. He never went in and saw her. He said, the mineral hall, went in the mineral hall, it was nice.
Yeah.
Charlie, I went to wring his neck. He was so detailed about everything that he wrote. And he never went. But other people from Aspen went. In fact, Charlie met 2 of his friends. And they spent 2 or 3 days at the fair together, touring the fair. There were special rates on the train from Aspen to the fair, as there were from all the major cities in the United States. So a lot of Aspenites went. And there are a few notices in the paper, Mr. and Mr. So-and-so were at the fair and they saw the Queen.
They saw the Queen.
The Chicago newspapers were not flattering about their description of the Queen. They didn't get it either. They just didn't quite understand the symbolism. It didn't move them in any way. Clearly the Queen was upstaged by Montana. And it's an interesting read if you do the research on the Montana exhibit. Montana really stepped forward at the World Fair in that way. Yeah.
Were those coins pressed from the Montana Queen commemorative?
No, they were melted down to make the Queen. And then the 2 mine owners who commissioned the Queen of Montana, they brought her back from the fair and displayed her in a couple of bank buildings for a while, and then they got into an argument. And so the only way to solve it was they melted that down and split it 50-50. Yeah. So that Queen is gone also. Yes.
So we got a picture of her in 1941. What happened?
That's it.
The building was
torn
condemned.
down.
So do you think it was just destroyed?
This is destroyed. This is,
Not that she was sent with a
well, there's not much left to keep.
Just the boat?
Yeah, I mean, even the base is,
Why? Why?
yeah, I mean, even the base is gone.
Yeah,
You can see she's already on the ground. It doesn't even look like the wheels are attached.
right, well.
So they've already taken her apart. So there was one person wrote a comment. Whenever I hear something by only one person, I usually discard it for research purposes because I can't verify it. But there is one report that some of the king and some of the queen pieces were put in the Boy Scout boathouse at the lake in front of the mineral palace, and that was the last anybody saw of her. The king's scepter was spotted years later in a hardware store selling coal. So the king's scepter managed to go there. And someone said his bust was also used for advertising coal by a hardware store. But yeah, it was simply, and it happens today. We don't know what we should save today, which would be significant 100 years from now. And this was a financial nightmare. It was a white elephant for the city. Let's get it out of here. Get rid of it. Do we save anything? No, everything valuable is already gone. So the Queen sadly just disappeared here. So that's the real story.
There you go.
So the next time you hear a good story, and if you hear a different story than I told you, let me know. I'd love to debunk these things, and I love the creativity of them. They have come up with some doozies. The Queen in the bottom of Hallam Lake, she's 18 feet high. Hallam Lake's what, 16 feet maybe?
Never say not that one.
No. And I've been here, they've dredged Hallam Lake at least twice. Yeah, that one's one of my favorites. So, I appreciate you being here.
We'll see you all next month.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Thank you.